Okay, so APRU Indigenous Connection Seminar Series welcomes you to our second conference. My name is David Romo, and I'm a former director of the Ethnic Diversity Program at Universidad San Francisco de Quito. And currently, I'm an emeritus professor at the university. And my commitment to APRU Indigenous working group will continue as long as I have the strength to do it. And APRU wants me to work with them. But my job mainly implied bringing Indigenous, Afro-Ecuadorian, and other minority students to the university. And our program is very successful because we have been able to meet about 10% of the undergraduate population. Taking in consideration that Universidad San Francisco de Quito, it's a private university and we have no funding from the government to do it. This is a private initiative and it's a very strong and ongoing and exemplary work program. This is my role in here, but my job will be to together with you, welcome our speaker and have an easygoing conversation in order to get together around these people that are coming to the seminars, an understanding of the kinds of things that Indigenous research, Indigenous knowledges, Indigenous students have to do to bring connections with academia. In our first conference, we had Wei Marie, a professor from the University of Auckland, giving an amazing conference, and we had a very interesting turnout, and we are very happy to get this ball going. I think I need to give pass to Adrian Little to talk to us a little bit about what APRU Indigenous Knowledge does, and since he is our director.
Thank you, David. Thanks, David. I wasn't expecting that. Look, it's great to see the seminar series underway. As you said, Maria gave us a great start. It's good to see so many people returning again for the second one and to have some new people here as well. So I'd just like to reiterate that the seminar series is not exclusive to a small group of people, but really we want to expose as many of our colleagues as possible to the different kinds of Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous programs at work in our universities. So it's fabulous to see you all here and welcome, and I'm really looking forward to Eldon's presentation. So back to you, David.
Okay, thank you, Adrian, for your words. And now it's my turn to introduce Eldon Yellowhorn. And I was practicing because his last name is actually Otkochkina in his language. And the best translation to that last name is Yellowhorn. And Eldon has not given us a biography in the panel, but he had rather talked about what his work has been. So to me, the most interesting, I've been trying to read a little bit about what his life has been and the meaning for his life in Fraser University. And he is a pioneer because he began doing research, doing something that we value from Indigenous people around the world, which is being the masters of trying to understand their own culture and conserve their culture, and research about archaeology and about the roots and about the history of his people. But not only he did that for his interest, but he went in and became the first chair of the Department of Indigenous Studies at Fraser University. And now he has the most amazing thing that I can say about Eldon is that he only has kind words when we ever had to discuss something. And this kindness makes it contagious to the rest of the group and makes it work in a kind environment. And thank you, Eldon, for sharing your friendship through this couple of years that we've met. And I welcome you tonight, and I'm very eager to hear what you have to say. And I hope the audience starts writing questions in the chat, and we will summarize and have a Q&A towards the end. So Eldon's talk is going to run for about half an hour to 35 minutes, and then we will have Q&A. Thank you, and go ahead, Eldon. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, David. It's wonderful to see you, even if it is via Zoom. And I would just like to say hello to everyone who is joining us this evening. As David said, I am an archaeologist. And yeah, today I actually had a fun day. I was invited by the city of Calgary to lead a field trip to some of their employees to a couple of archaeological sites around the city. And we had a very full day. It was a lot of fun being out in the fresh air. And yeah, now I'm actually in a hotel room in Calgary, away from my own place. So I have this PowerPoint presentation that I'll share with you, and I will talk a little bit about myself and give some biographical details about my connection to SFU. So I will just start my presentation here. All right. So this Lukluk is the Squamish language where SFU is located. Lukluk is the traditional name of Burnaby Mountain, which is the place of arbutus trees. And today it is the campus for Simon Fraser University. So I want to give you a traditional welcome first. Okay. Nistako kutkutskina. Nitsipi kanikwan. Ninok tutu amusauki. Enok nitsitu tapi emmi mutuyohkia. So, welcome to SFU, where our motto is engaging the world. And that's a very ironic motto because our campus is located atop Burnaby Mountain in the city of British Columbia. And it's often been a place that we're trying to avoid this reputation of being, we don't want to give the impression of being an isolated ivory tower on the top of the mountain. So engaging the world is our mission as well as our motto. But we're not just located on top of Burnaby Mountain. We also have campus in two nearby cities, Vancouver and Surrey. Oh, sorry. So SFU was established in 1965. And at that time, there were very few universities in Canada, and there was a large cohort of students from the baby boom who were just starting to come into adulthood, and they needed to have more universities for that. And so SFU was an instant university that was built on atop Burnaby Mountain. Everything from the buildings to the faculty and administration was all parachuted onto this new campus, and then it started operating and offering courses in September of 1965. Oh, this is the main convocation mall where when we have our graduation ceremonies, you can see the people on the stairwell. So all the faculty and students parade down those stairways and then sit in this mall. But this is a picture on the right is actually the same location, only in the middle of winter. So the Arthur Erickson and Jeffrey Massey were the architects who designed SFU. And at that time in the 1960s, brutalist archaeology, or brutalist architecture, sorry, brutalist architecture was popular, and cement was the main building medium. But this whole university, the way it was built, it was meant to project a vision of the future, that this was where the future was going to happen. So until SFU was built, there was a dense forest on the mountaintop. So the design of the buildings was meant to contrast to the surrounding forest. And that has remained a vital part of our campus. So although we have now a residential development known as University on the mountaintop, the forest is still the defining feature of our campus. And in the center of it, the academic quadrangle is the heart of campus. That's where this open area in the middle of the academic quadrangle is also meant to be a contrasting space of like a park-like space in the center of this very like the brutalist design of the building. But this academic quadrangle is filled with lecture theaters, classrooms, and service facilities. There are also departmental and faculty offices along there. So this is, of course, in the 1960s, when we were designing this, we didn't really have an appreciation of the impact that earthquakes might have in this area. So we've had to go back, or well, not me, but the university has had to go back and retrofit some features to give it a little more stability in an earthquake. One of our most famous alumnus is Terry Fox, or he is our most famous alumnus, I'm pretty sure. He grew up in Burnaby and attended SFU. And then this was in the 1980s, he started the Marathon of Hope to cross Canada. And he was doing it as a way to raise money for cancer research. He never completed it, but it's still, every year, we still have a 10-kilometer road race to commemorate this Marathon of Hope. And it's also spread to other countries and other parts of the world. You know, they know who Terry Fox is. So SFU is now, we're trying to be the Indigenous campus. We've invested a lot, or the university has invested a lot in bringing things to the campus to make it, to give it more of that Squamish identity, the Indigenous identity. So this welcome pole, which was carved by a Squamish artist, Sinamkin, in 2017. It's right at the start, right at the entrance to the university as you drive up the mountain. It is part of the university's efforts to raise its profile among the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Coquitlam peoples whose homeland is where SFU is located. So this is a very concerted effort to be more inviting to the Indigenous community. Now, there was a time when Indigenous people were absent from the university community. And in fact, right from the start, when it was founded in 1965 until 1998, there was nothing in the program, in the catalog, or on campus where you would find programs or support for Indigenous faculty or students. So this is, there was a lot of time for them to catch up on, you know, over 30 years that they had ignored the four First Nations that are their neighbors, and the university had no problem overlooking them. That changed in 1998. So indigenizing the campus became a very specific and very purposeful project that began in 1998. In the early 1990s, SFU had developed a partnership with the Kamloops Indian Band to have a satellite campus built on their reserve. And so this satellite campus was mainly Indigenous students who were attending it. It was very small, and they developed courses called First Nations Studies to give the students options for coursework. And this First Nations Studies was modeled on the ethnic studies program that is now fairly common, with Asian studies or African American studies and Native American studies. So we're kind of continuing that tradition of ethnic studies. In the mid-1990s, SFU administration decided to start a similar program on the main campus in Burnaby. But they had nobody there to teach the courses. It was a great idea, but who was going to teach the courses? And well, I had completed a master's degree in the archaeology department at SFU in the early 90s. And so then I went off to McGill University to work on my PhD. And I was still a graduate student in 1998 when they came calling and recruited me to come back to SFU and set up the program. So something from nothing. That was my task when I arrived here. Plus, I still had to write my dissertation and complete my PhD. Yeah, in the 1990s, when I started university, a PhD program here, there were maybe a dozen Indigenous people across Canada who had doctorates and could hold a faculty position. So I came along. I was the first Indigenous person in Canada to complete a PhD in archaeology in 2002, and the first to be hired at SFU as faculty since 1965. So since then, we have reached various milestones in bringing an Indigenous route to the university, and I was the person building that pathway. And Indigenous studies basically reflects my career at SFU, because everything that we know as our program today, at some point in the past, I had a hand in building it. So SFU is a research-intensive university, and that's what I was also hired to do as a faculty. I had to have a research program, and I was an archaeologist, so I was working in the Department of Archaeology. It was the host of the First Nations Studies program. And since it was my discipline, I could teach courses in both archaeology and in First Nations Studies. So they kind of complemented each other. And I continued to do research in historic archaeology, which I went back to my home community and did a historic archaeology because, like my ancestors were Piikani. They had no written language. They had only an oral tradition. And so for those first two generations who settled on the reserve and who became farmers, there was no way for them to preserve their story. So by going back there and doing material culture studies, I was able to triangulate data that I got from my material culture studies with oral history research and archival work. And from these three sources of data, I was able to put together a pretty good narrative. And then I made a documentary, which I posted on YouTube. You can search it if you want. It's called Digging Up the Res, the Piikani Historical Archaeology Project. In fact, SFU has a YouTube channel, and that's where you'll find it, is on YouTube. So the Department of Indigenous Studies was, again, it started off as First Nation Studies. I was hired in 1998 to start the path to indigenizing the university. And 14 years later, we had a Department of First Nation Studies, which I established in 2012. I was the founding chair, and we had 5 charter faculty, 3 women and 2 men. I served as chair from 2012 to 2017, and I oversaw the expansion of the department in terms of course offerings and faculty. And still today, our focus is on the undergraduate program leading to a Bachelor of Arts degree. We are projecting to start a graduate program soonish. Our department is just now undergoing its second external review. So after the external review is complete, then we can start making more concrete plans for how to go forward in the future. But, after all these years, since we're now well into our second decade as a standalone autonomous department in the university, Indigenous Studies is now a mature discipline at SFU. We have 13 faculty who teach courses in 4 streams or concentrations, and on any year, we'll be able to offer at least 38 courses, undergraduate courses, from the complement of faculty that we have. There are 4 streams that we or concentrations. There's a strong focus on environment and Indigenous knowledge. A second stream concentrates on arts and literature. The third focus is public policy and governance. And the fourth involves language preservation and revitalization. And this is something that I am very active in. At our inaugural meeting in Mexico, I gave a demonstration of the Blackfoot chatbot that I had created. Well, now we have a Cree chatbot that we have just launched as of December. And we're starting working on a Squamish chatbot, Squamish being the local Indigenous language that people speak. And so we wanted to have something to that they could use in their own language revitalization. Our department and our faculty are very committed to this idea of participatory action research. It is a community-oriented research. It is community-oriented research built on connections that involve Indigenous people and knowledges. So, and I think this is one of the things that has grown out of the pandemic is this idea of we don't always have to be on campus to do our research or even to teach our courses. So some of our faculty who are working in remote communities work with the local people, but they also bring their graduate students, if they have graduate students or undergraduates, to work with them, to work with the community. And if they're teaching a course, yeah, like Zoom has become such an indispensable product for us to be able to have these communities. And yeah, I have to say too that the city of Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, Metro Vancouver, has become very expensive that even some of our faculty cannot find adequate housing. So it actually benefits us that they can work in remote in their own communities and still be able to participate. I recall back in the 1980s when Alvin Toffler published his book, The Third Wave, and he talked about this idea of the electronic cabin, that we wouldn't always be connected with each other through electronic media. And I kind of feel that this is finally coming to fruition. So field work is an essential component of the work, much of the work that our faculty conduct. And we also encourage partnerships with other schools and departments on campus. For example, I have been working with the School of Computing Science, professor in that department, and her graduate students and undergraduates to do these chatbots that we're creating. And it's actually been something of a revelation to the students themselves, that many of the students are international students who come to work at SFU, and they don't really have any understanding of the local Indigenous community. And then they start working on these languages, and for the first time they recognize, wow, there really are Indigenous people still in this area. So that's very much a part of it. And then, here in Canada, we're a bilingual nation. French and English are given equal weight. And so we had a cohort of students that were being ignored from the fact that we couldn't teach First Nation studies or Indigenous studies in French. So we recently created a partnership with the Department of French that serves they have all these French immersion schools in British Columbia, but their teachers were not getting the curriculum from Indigenous studies. So in creating this partnership with the Department of French, we can now actually service students who are going to be teachers in the French immersion programs in the local area. Yeah, and of course, the university is all about the students, without the students, we wouldn't really have much to deal with, So the Indigenous Student Center is the place on campus where, we help students succeed. It's kind of like the Indian Friendship Center on campus is the place where you go to meet friends or to make friends. And it's always open, when, as long as there's somebody there. Indigenous Pathways has helped them to improve their skills so that they can take courses at the university level. This is Every year we have an honoring feast for the new alumni who are getting their degrees conferred on them. And yeah, we used to, when I first started teaching at SFU was not known as a place that was particularly welcoming to Indigenous students. So we often struggled to get even 6 people when we wanted to have a honoring feast for their convocation. We would very rarely get more than 10 people, and it was an anomaly if we got 20. But now, on a regular basis, we have between 150 and 170 students who receive degrees from SFU from all levels, from BA, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Education, MA. We also have some who get PhDs, And in order to help the students succeed, we want to give them some cultural connections to the local area. So we have elders in residence, participation from local elders who play a role in helping students navigate through the life of the student is full of stress, and even doing something like visiting campus at exam time to just talk to people is a way of alleviating some of that stress. Yeah, if you walk around the SFU community today, one of the things you first notice is the amount of public art dedicated to Indigenous people, and in all places, But public art is kind of a visual reminder of the Indigenous cultures on campus. But yeah, Indigenous people say, well, we're more than just public art. Yeah, public art is great, but give us more for substance. So we have, for example, the Office for Aboriginal People, which is the main meeting point between the university and local First Nations. The director is Ron Johnson. That's the fellow standing in the middle with the gray hair. He's from the Squamish Nation, the Capilano Reserve. And one of his cousins is Chris Lewis, who is also, I should say, Ron was formerly one of my students. When I first started teaching there, he was one of the first students who took courses from me. And then his cousin, Chris Lewis, is also a former student of mine. He is now a special advisor, like a special advisor to the president. A lot of the people who are now working at SFU, at one point in the past, I had some participation in giving them some coursework, and I know a lot of them personally through that route. Yeah, so as part of moving forward, and in Canada, we had this Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was given the task of truth finding in the residential schools that were very common across Canada for well over a century. And one of the key calls to action was through educational institutions. The lead commissioner, Murray Sinclair, said, education got us into this mess. Education will get us out of it. So we've been putting that to giving some action to those words. So SFU created its own Aboriginal Reconciliation Council, and I was on that council, as well as my 2 former students, Chris Lewis and Ron Johnson. We were part of this Aboriginal Reconciliation Council, and we held public hearings, and we created a report to determine the best way forward for indigenizing the campus. So from the consultations, the one thing that everybody talked about was that they wanted First Peoples Gathering House on campus. So in 2018, the university put together a building committee to oversee construction of that new First Peoples Gathering House, and I am on that committee as well. So I'm having a hand in design, but choosing the architects and choosing the design of the building, these were some of the things that we had to do. And of course, fundraising for it, because it's not, especially today, it's gotten a lot pricier to build new structures. So this is the future site of the First Peoples Gathering House. And it will be completed this fall, the fall of 2024. We are looking at that as our completion date. So just to give you an idea, the First Peoples House, it's a work in progress right now. This first view to the north is also looking up towards the building, because the hillside descends from that part of it. But this view to the west, that's approaching the building from the east, and it gives you an impression of how the entrance is coming along. And then the final slide, which is the view to the east, that's from the northwest corner of the building. So it's actually in coming along very well. It will be, there's been a lot of things that you don't really think about, For one thing, we have a lot of windows in this place, and we don't want to kill a lot of birds. So we have to find special material to coat the windows with glass so that birds will see this and know to avoid it. Yeah, and of course, right next door to us is the Trache Observatory. And we don't, because we have a lot of glass windows, it means there's a lot of light there. So of course we want to be good neighbors with oh, you're not hearing me? Oh, sorry. Yeah, we want to be good neighbors with the Trache Observatory. So we also had to be conscious of the amount of light bleeding out of the building that would interfere. I mean, we often have cloudy skies, but on those few nights when we have clear nights, they do like to have public presentations. So we're trying to work with them rather than oppose them. Oops, oh, sorry. Yeah, so I just want to end with this. I was talking about being working with Indigenous languages, preservation and revitalization, and how we try to create partnerships with disciplines that ordinarily we wouldn't engage with. So I'm a native speaker of Niitsipoksun, and one day a math professor came to my office and he said, I was just at this conference where Indigenous educators were talking about the difficulty of teaching math to their students, and when the main reason they give is that they don't see themselves in this. So he wanted to make a video that would have a math puzzle kind of spoken in a native language, and that this would help encourage students. So this was the project that we worked on together. He gave me a script in English, and I translated it into Blackfoot, and then I also was partnered with my sister, and she helped me translate it, and then I narrated the dialogue for the video. And yeah, this was the first one, but now we have dozens of them in many different languages. We have some in Cree, there's some in Haida, some in the Coast Salish languages. So we have a lot of these now, and they're all online on YouTube, so people can access them anytime. This is a story, but it also contains a math puzzle. And if you want to solve the math puzzle, of course, you have to learn the language. But I won't expect you to do that here. I'll just play you the video here, and you can get a chance. And this will give you an idea of what Blackfoot sounds like. Okskarkskin kipipun itotukstakiam. Ama sahkumapi ainesta okskarks. Äsistoistujimin ki katsaskivan. Oppokitopia mea vaan
maar 6. Wat zie ik ze hier voor de kijks? Maar ik heb de beschikbaar mee. Wat ze daar kijken bewa. Ik kan ze kijken, misschien niet toe is. Tot ik ook hier wat op is. Ken ik eigenlijk te gaan? En maar boekskaksen. Het zit zo. Het zit daar bij mij zich posa. Amo ook akeni. Api ook akeni. Ik snap ze. Is het zeker zit bij mij. Maar zeg kom maar. Skestajes kan maximum zijn met posa. Ik dacht ja, dat is dat ik het zo aan maak zijn met zich posa. Skocht ook zijn maar meer api wat is gestoord. Ach ja, boekskaas. A me maakse, deze system kay. Maar met deze system kay, maak wat kan hij is dat stil aan me maximum. A me maakse, maak het stakken, maak het op stap is a me niet toe is. Ik kom mij goed schema. Zo dat met je kip bij of katsewa, maar een stakje samape spik. Als je dacht kan na kaku je spik, a me maximum. Is kunnen hier wij, wat toch katse dak stakje, die pipboy. Dan is het waar mag ook stoer zijn, misschien niet door is. Ook kom uit dat boekstadje en meer kolen. Het is ook kopie, ja. En meer benapel, dit zijn. Oké, ik doe motor kaart doen, maar is het ook kaart is. Ik kan staan voor de koe, maar ook aan scapels. Ik sta met je stoot dat koe. Ik heb een stukje zeker pippen. Ken je man, ik het oké. Ik kan stil waar meer maken en meer niet door is, wat ze boekstad spelen. Maar boekskaksen, ito matapepi. En meer kulai, ito matapokstakje. Niet ook sky is to matapokstakje. Wat is kitu toch zie meer kulai. Nane soy, de kopstakje. Dat is kitu toch zie meer kulai. Is het je kopen, gaat kopstakje. Daar koop je. Ook iets is to matapokstakje. Aanem. Naast en je ook na niks is de arena of kulai. De meer kulai, focus stil. O stoor wij of doorwij. Zijn het schreman en maapboksklaksen, betekent het ze kokstakje. En meer niet door is pokistil, o stoor wij en meer doorwij. Die matchte nou stomen is niet door is.
Yeah, I'll just stop it there. This is the credits roll after this. Yeah, there's a story about the little boy who gets sprayed by the skunk, and his grandmother tries to wash him down, but he smells too much. So she gives him this task there's 7 teepees. She says, how many times would you have to walk around before you count to 100? And so that's the stories. He learns, or he counts to 100, but he doesn't have to keep walking around until he gets there. He was able to do the math with his hands. So how was he able to do that? Yeah, so that's my presentation. Kenya, yeah. That's thank you, and Blackfoot. Thank you very much. I'll just stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Eldon. And you already have some reactions from the public. So I have one question right away for you. It says, how you have navigated through politics to continue or implement decolonial research methodologies within the Department of Indigenous Studies in the earliest stages of your work?
Yeah. I never got into this idea of decolonization. In fact, I went the opposite direction, and I made the case that Indigenous people were colonizing Canada. And when I put this was back in 2004. So I've always worked along that line that, you know, we're colonizing Canada, and these are some of the things that we would see as we went along. And in fact, 4 of the predictions that I made 4 predictions on what we would see if if this colonizing Canada was was a viable idea, and all 4 of those predictions came true. So I think I'm on a path towards something, and I still work on that. So yeah, I never embraced the idea of decolonization, and in fact I go the opposite direction and say Indigenous people across the world are colonizing the nation state.
Well, I think I wouldn't expect less. So I had a question. Let me just. Okay, we have what percentage of the students that enroll in the department are Indigenous students?
Well, they are a minority on campus, so the majority of our students are actually not Indigenous. They're Canadians, you know, from all cultures from in Canada. You know, there's white kids, there's brown kids, black kids. They just come and they take our courses, and we welcome them all. We want to be inviting and to have them join us. But we also continue to have a strong complement of Indigenous students. All our classes are full. Every semester, you know, if we had enrollment of 110, we'll get 110 people in our classes. But not all of them will be Indigenous students. In fact, the minority will be Indigenous students. There's a real appetite right now in Canada for content that, because a lot of Canadians says that Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report. There's been a real attempt by Canadians to put some meaning to what does this reconciliation mean, and so that's what that's why we're very inviting with everybody, because we feel we have a role to play in that.
Okay, I'm going to try to honor the order, but good to hear you're talking about truth processes, Eldon, and wonder if you have any thoughts about universities telling the truth about their history. There's a new book co-edited by Marshall Langdon, which was launched this week by Melbourne University Press, telling the shameful story of the University of Melbourne. It is called Dumbag Gawana, and you can find the details and in YouTube. But I guess if I catch what Adrian is trying to say, how good has been your university at telling the past from the present?
Well, you know, Simon Fraser was one of those guys who was always said he was an explorer, and he discovered the Fraser River. So now we have the Fraser River that flows through British Columbia, named after him. So that's you know, like we have to outlive that colonial name, that colonial history. There's been no, I mean, at other universities in Canada, there have been, you know, forces that have caused universities to change their name. You know, for example, there was Ryerson Polytechnic University in Toronto that the fellow Ryerson was one of the chief architects of the residential school system, and the university didn't want to be associated with that. So now they're called Toronto Metropolitan University. We haven't gotten to that point. Nobody said, you know, like Simon Fraser, we should come up with a better name than that, you know. I think I would say this, that our university has transcended that name, and that, you know, inviting Indigenous people to become a part of the community, having initiatives such as the Department of Indigenous Studies, and, you know, things like the First Peoples Gathering House, to try and transform the university from a place that was very well, ignorant of Indigenous people to one that, you know, like I'm quite proud to say that at SFU, we have become perhaps one of the leading universities in Canada offering Indigenous studies, and that the only thing that stops us from being the best is that we don't have a graduate program, but we're working on that, you know, because we are a research-intensive university. All our faculty are involved in research, and graduate students are vital to helping us continue that research, you know, so we're always looking forward to that.
Okay, so we have another question that says, how do you define indigenizing? What does this entail, and how do you ensure respectful towards Indigenous people when you're indigenizing the campus?
Yeah, you know, like I would point to one of the things such as our annual honoring feast for our graduate students, or our graduating students. We have an honoring feast where we actually have a banquet with a keynote speaker, and they all get recognized for their achievements. But we also have an honoring powwow, which a powwow is not a tradition from the West Coast. Powwow is a tradition from the people I'm from, the Blackfoot on the plains. We're the ones who invented the powwow, but it's kind of become our main cultural export. And sharing these cultural traditions with other people is what they're all about, And on campus, the students have embraced that idea, and they look forward to it, And so that's these are the kinds of, individually, one event might not make a big splash, but just like the public art, you see one, you see it two, three, but then eventually you want to see more than just public art. And I think that's where we are. We're starting to offer substance like a Department of Indigenous Studies that you can get a degree in. And often our undergraduates who get degrees go into other things like teaching. It's preparatory for law school. Some go into graduate studies. So we do contribute a great deal that way, And we're always looking to build the student population on campus. Initially, we had our goal was, that Indigenous people were 5% of the population of British Columbia. So we use that as our metric to determine how many Indigenous students. So we say if there's 5% of the general population, they should be 5% at least of the student population. Now at SFU, we have 40,000 students every year, on our campus. So we're saying that at least 2,000 should be Indigenous students. We haven't reached that, but we're moving towards it.
Okay. So how many do you have?
On an annual basis, we now have closer to 1,000. And I will say that some of the things that are becoming evident from that is that about 75% of our students are women and only 25 are men. And then when you go to the graduate level, that changes even more. It becomes 90% are women and only 10% men. So we still have some work to do. And that's what, when we find these things in our statistics, we know where we'd have work to do.
So, sorry, that was my tipping question. Okay, so I'm going to put two questions in one. Somebody is asking if you have a Quechua program at the university, since it's one of the most spoken languages in South America, indigenous languages spoken in South America, and it's becoming very strong in widely spoken in the US. And another student, another of our viewers wants you to elaborate on this decolonization versus colonizing the nation view of yours.
Okay. What the first question was, could you just repeat that one?
Okay, if you have Quechua being taught.
Yeah, no. We focus on the local languages, the Squamish, the Coast Salish languages, but we also go farther afield to the neighboring provinces and the Yukon Territory, where we have like Cree and Blackfoot. We have taught courses in those. Oddly enough, as a result of refugees coming to Canada in the 1980s and 90s, we have a large Mayan population here in Vancouver in the Lower Mainland. So for a while there, we were actually offering courses in Mayan as well. So these are language courses, So whenever we get the demand, there's got to be a critical mass for demand before we can offer something, and that's where we are with that.
And your other question was about your view on colonizing versus decolonization.
Yeah, well, when I think about decolonization, I think about Hong Kong in 1997, where the colonizers get up and leave and go and give the country back to the indigenous people. I don't see anything like that ever happening in Canada or in North America, for that matter. I mean, we're dealing with if we started going down that path of decolonization, on the international definition of that, it would mean millions of people would have to get up and leave. Like, for example, in Canada, Indigenous people are maybe 4% of the population. If we tried to push forward with the decolonization, that means 96% of the Canadian population would have to get up and go back to the homeland of their ancestors. Now, that's just not feasible. That's never going to happen, So what are the alternatives? For starters, like when I started thinking about the colonizing Canada, we have to get something beyond the stalemate that we are at now. Since Canada began its second century as a country in 1967, Indigenous people in Canada have kind of reached a stalemate with each other. Canada wants to assimilate all Native people into the body politic of Canada. Indigenous people reject that very idea of assimilation, and they want to have some kind of accommodation in which they have, maybe not all the traditional hallmarks of autonomy, but to have at least some ability to act on their own agency and to have their own motives in the forefront, rather than always being told by the nation state, this is what you must do in order to be a good citizen. And we're saying, Indigenous people here in Canada, we do not owe our identity, we do not owe our existence to Canada. In fact, we existed long before Canada existed, so it's Canada who has to accommodate us. And the only way we're going to have something to do is to colonize Canada. And I'm talking about colonizing Canada and its institutions, so in my book in 2014 or 2004, I said the 4 predictions I made was that one major city in Canada would elect an Indigenous mayor. That happened in 2014 with the city of Winnipeg. And they also said, okay, by 2027, we'll have an Indigenous Governor General. And yeah, we have an Indigenous Governor General now. And I also said, we'll also have an Indigenous justice on the Supreme Court of Canada. And lo and behold, we now have an Indigenous justice on the Supreme Court of Canada. And I also said one of our provinces would elect an Indigenous person as as a premier. And just last year, the province of Manitoba elected an Indigenous man as a premier. So these are examples of how Indigenous people are colonizing Canada, taking hold of the levers of power that the apparatus that runs the nation state, and taking control of those levers and being the ones who make the decisions so that they benefit us, rather than always being the ones who are in harm's way when decisions are made.
Eldon, I am very sorry. We're getting close to the end, and there's a couple of questions that were not answered. So I truly apologize for the.
Apologize. Just let people know my email. They can always email me and ask me personally. I'll be happy to answer their questions.
Yeah, okay. And Linda Marie sent a message to you that I think it's very important that when you're inaugurating your home, it should be a big feast, and we should all be there with you. So please count us on and make sure that you share this wonderful opening of your house with us. So thank you.
To come and
For
see
the
us.
people that have been having problems with internet and coming in and out, we are recording, and you will be able to come to the webpage of APRU and find us and download a video that will be also through YouTube channel, so you can watch the entire conference. next conference will be on June 28th. And we will have the case of the University of the Philippines, Baguio, and it will be by Professor Raimundo Robilos. And Ray, it's somebody that you, especially for people that these young people that are coming to our seminars that are interested in academia and trying to go to educational institutions, listening to Raimundo will be something that you want to keep in mind when you want to replicate these things in your countries and in your wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much, and I let Adriana say some closing remarks. Thank you all for coming this evening and this morning.
Thank you, Eldon. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And well, see you next month with our next conference. And we really look forward to having you during this year until December. So thanks, everybody, and see you soon.